once we have created the constructor of the class, now let's try to overload a constructor. The idea behind overload is that you have more than one constructors that have exactly the same name but different signatures. Now, when we use the term signature in the programming language, we basically mean the name of the method and the parameter list. So the name of the method will be the same. That's exactly what makes it overload. You can actually overload any of the methods in Java. It doesn't necessarily has to be just constructors, but when you overload a constructor, we call it an overloaded constructor. So let me write a comment down here, that overloaded constructor. Now all you're gonna do is just copy paste this code from up there to down here. Okay. Now, as I was talking about, now of course Java doesn't allow you to have two constructors with exactly the same definition as I was talking about earlier on. So I'm gonna make some changes here. So rather, I'm gonna have this accept a couple of parameters. Now the main reason behind doing so is that we have one constructor that sets all objects to their defaults. Now we would like to create another constructor where the programmer has given this power of instantiating the objects with not the preset defaults, but the defaults that programmer would like to set the object with. So for that very purpose, we're allowing this constructor to pass two sets of parameters, and each parameter is being passed into the body of the constructor, and then we are using those to set the values for the object properties. So the constructor employee2 in this case will be used to accept two parameters from the user, and we'll be able to set the object properties with those two values. Now let's try to put this to practice by calling the object, the second object, which is emp2, instead of with the default constructor. So calling with default constructor, we will now try to call this with overloaded constructor, the second one. So I'll just comment it here, calling with overloaded constructor. Okay, and in order to call with overloaded constructor, let me pass here a name. Let's call it no name, just to be a little different from the first one. And the second parameter, just to be different from the first one, let's set it to 10.77. Okay. So now when we look at the pre-values, you're going to notice the pre-values for EMP1 will be the preset values which are not yet set and -1.0, and for the EMP2 will be the values that we're going to pass into these parameters, which will be no name and 10.77. Now, since these values are dynamic, if I create emp3 and I decide to call the overloaded constructor, I can pass different values, and then those will be the values that will reflect emp3. But you have to understand that whenever you assign values to the properties of an object, those values are only associated with that object, because objects by nature are non-static. That means they don't share the states, they just maintain their own state. Whatever change you make to them will gonna stay with them, and that is the very reason that all the setters and getters are also non-static, because they maintain a state of the object, or they are used to retrieve the state of the object or to set the state of the object. So you got to always keep in mind that whenever you're dealing at the object level, you have to make sure that you're working with non-static. So now let's try to run this, and since I didn't save it, that's why it gave me that dialog box, and I clicked OK on it, and here you can see that employee 1 is not yet set with negative 1.0, and employee 2 is whatever we passed, like no name, as opposed to not yet set. And instead of negative 1.0, we decided to settle with 10.77. And down here you were able to notice that either way the values were overwritten by the next set of execution. Thank you for watching it.